In an early interview, Miyazaki said that the landmass for the DLC would be roughly the same size as Limgrave, if not a little bit bigger. But after fully getting through the DLC, all I can say is that we have been misled, because this DLC is absolutely massive. What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my review of Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, we're going to be keeping spoilers to a minimum in this video, just to give you an idea of the scope of the world. Pretty much everything you see is somewhere we can go. Those buildings off in the distance, the giant mountain range. What about the south side? What do we got down there? We have all these valleys we can go into. See that giant foggy area? There's even stuff down there. And when playing this DLC, the one word that really comes to mind is verticality. And, you know, thinking about the base game, when I think about verticality in the world, I think Lakes of Liurnia, I think Mountaintops of the Giants. And they really took that and then they cranked it to 11 for Shadow of the Erdtree, because the highs and the lows, and not like highs and lows of content, but highs and lows of actual stuff to explore, is absolutely insane. Now, real fast right up front, just to talk about any potential spoilers, we have obviously a new weapon, we have a shield on, we have new armor, and we have one new spell. That is going to be the limit of spoilers for this video. But just to give an idea when I'm talking about verticality, like, you know, there's areas down there we can go, but then areas we can go even lower, and then areas we can go even lower, and then areas we can go even lower, and then there's areas that can go even higher, and it's just ridiculous. There's so much we can explore here in terms of the verticality of the world and running and looking around, that it's, in some cases, just mind-boggling to think that they just took it and they cranked it up this high. So to talk about that verticality and how that equates into the size of the game, in terms of a singular playthrough, my Let's Play clocked in right around 35 hours. Since then, I've been exploring and still finding new stuff. I mean, I just found a smithing stone back there. But in terms of total playtime, I think most people are going to clock in around the 40-hour mark, which for a DLC I think is pretty freaking substantial. That's longer than a lot of AAA games these days. So you're definitely going to get your money's worth in terms of the price to content ratio. And one of the things that I like so much about this is it does feel familiar, but at the same time it feels very fresh. And an example I like to think of is New Game Plus. You know, I think there's something that's very satisfying about playing through a Souls-like, whether it be one of the older ones or Elden Ring, when you have a build that's done. You know, you have your cool weapons, you have your cool spells, and you're like, all right, I'm the badass now. Let's see what the game has to offer. And yeah, it's still fun to do, but I think there's something that's lost when you're playing through on New Game Plus, only because, you know, it's New Game Plus. You already know the bosses, you already know the locales, and there's something that I think is lost because that sense of exploration and learning the patterns and that challenge is already gone. You know, instead you are more focused on, or how fast can I just beat this using this particular build. And so getting a chance to go through the DLC and experience new content with that build is a very different experience that I personally found to be one of the most enjoyable I have ever had in a FromSoft game. Now, I think a big part of that has been my build. This character is quite high level. I'm at 359. As you can see, I have the caps to use pretty much any and all weapons, and it just resulted in such an insanely fun experience. I mean, every time I found a new weapon, I was equipping it and trying it on out, so I was getting a chance to experience everything the DLC had to offer. You know, if I was fighting against if I was playing like a fire type build and came up against a boss that was using lots of fire, I was just switching it up and turning my build into something else to tackle the boss. But being able to take a holistic approach like that to the combat and just experience quite literally everything in my first playthrough, it was just an absolute delight. There's no other way to describe it. I don't think I've had this much fun with a FromSoft game in a long time. And then when you consider the type of content that we're getting to experience, I absolutely think this is something that takes Elden Ring from the fantastic game it already was and elevates it even further. I think this truly puts it into the category of it being an absolute generational game that, you know, people are going to be playing and talking about this for a long time, I think. The big nightman. Like him, I have not found that hammer. I want that hammer. That hammer speaks to me. But that's the thing, you know, I don't know where it's at. And I would assume it's out there because I found his shield and I found the armor. So there's still stuff to explore. But either way, talking about the gameplay explorations and the expectations, one of the big things I want to talk about is scaling, with how it works with the Shadow Tree blessings and the Revered Spirit Ash blessings. So let's talk about that real fast. Really like this system and what they did here. So we have two categories, Skidoo Tree Blessing and Revered Spirit Ash Blessing. Now these are items that we're going to find across the map, and as you collect them, this starts off with you like needing 1 and then 2 and then 3, etc. As far as I know, I would guess Spirit Ash goes up to 10, Skidoo Tree goes up to 20. Skidoo Tree Blessings give you a defensive boost and then a flat 5% attack power. So you can see my attack power is up at a whopping 1433, while my defenses are up in the like 65 and 60 category. Now real fast, just to go to round table hold, I'm gonna go as fast as I can, keep the map on screen for only a split second there. But if we see what my true stats look like, you can see they're much, much lower. And this is what I think the DLC does so well, is it takes it and allows us to kind of power level ourselves in a sense. You know, if we get all those blessings, we're getting up to what would be roughly, actually exactly double our AR. The defense values are a little bit iffier. It seems like those just go up almost flat per mounts. I was trying to figure out the percentage base, but you know, with all the decimals, I was like, this isn't, you know, it wasn't quite lining up as good as the AR was, but I'm sure it's you know, part percentage base, part flat, something like that. Either way, but the point being that it's a really nice system in the sense that it allows us to have this power fantasy even more so in the DLC, where, you know, like, oh, I got 1400 AR, that's huge, you know, big number, make brain happy, but at the same time, doesn't impact the main game whatsoever. And so we have this system where the scaling works in for the DLC, allowing us to do these crazy big hits and really feel the power fantasy of our character, while also working seamlessly into the base game. And I think that's something that was done very, very well. Because, you know, you don't want your character to feel too overpowered in the DLC. And rest assured, like, you can absolutely get trounced by content in this DLC, you know, just to show, you know, like we said, 359, 60 vigor, mitigation at like the 66. I'm gonna go show y'all a basic soldier. These are just some basic soldiers over here, and I'm just gonna chill and let one of these dudes hit me, because I know I've seen some people and they're worried like, oh well, the DLC is gonna be too easy for me. Half my health. I let that dude hit me 3 times. Half my health is gone. This is a basic, this is basic Bobby over here. This is like your you know, Limgrave soldier of the DLC, and you saw how hard dude hit me. So if you're going into this and you're worried like, oh well, I'm gonna be over leveled, or you know, I'm on new game +1, but I'm like level 400. No, you'll be fine. Like I said, this is new game +1. This character's up to 350. Even despite that, I'll say some of the bosses were still incredibly challenging. The final boss, I think, is one of the hardest bosses, I think, in the history of Souls. So, like, rest assured, if you play these games for a challenge, the challenge is going to be there. It's going to feel good. Talking a little bit about art design and environments, obviously FromSoft doesn't miss in this regard. And I think they did an excellent job here. The Graveyard Plains has this, like, you know, endless graveyard type vibe going on. We have the coastline, which is probably my personal favorite zone, just very beautiful. You know, the hinterlands, the ruins. We have all of these new areas to go and explore, and a lot of them feel very unique for a FromSoft game. You know, I think when we think about the base game, like, we had good biome diversity, but I think it'd be accurate to say it was, they kind of played it a little safe. You know, like we have Limgrave, which is kind of like your basic area, and then we have Altus, which is the fall area, and we have the snowy area and the volcanic area, and Caelid with the Roddy area. But some of the biomes here are just very, very fresh. In particular, the Cerulean Coast. It's just this like sprawling coastline with these blue flowers all over the place. Very, very beautiful zone. And, you know, that also applies to some of the other zones that we're going to explore later. So I think they did a really good job of, you know, just kind of updating the biomes a little bit so it wasn't as cookie cutter as we had in the first game. I mean, they had great diversity there, but it's even different here, you know? I feel like we always see the standard tropes of, like, you know, like plains, fall, forest, lava, ice. And the new biomes don't just fall into those buckets, which is something that I really liked. In terms of thoughts on the environments, I will say there was one that I wasn't really a fan of. There's a chunk that was involved in a side quest that's just kind of barren, and it did bring back thoughts of the lava area. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but the lava area in Dark Souls 1 where you're like, huh, I guess that's it. So there was one area like that that threw me off, but the rest of it was so good that, you know, it's hard to really knock it down when one area doesn't meet my expectations when the others are so phenomenal. In terms of sound design, it's what you would expect from Software. You know, the weapon sounds crisp, the boss music is always top notch. The NPC voice acting is really good, and, you know, really no complaints from sound design at all. I think they did a great job. FromSoft did what FromSoft does. In terms of performance, for the most part, I think performance was pretty good. Obviously, I still have a little bit of pop-in, and I have that weird PC hang. It's so weird, because I had that back at launch, and then it went away, and then it came back. I don't know what's causing that, but my character will be running, and then I'll have this, like, split second where I have, like, a freeze frame, and then the game, like, speeds up, and my character zips over to where he was going. And I don't know exactly what causes that. It's a ongoing issue for me, but I've just learned to play through it at this point. But in terms of general performance, I'd say things are good. For the most part, I was sitting steady at 60, which is what I would expect from my rig. But, you know, if you have decent performance in Elden Ring, you're going to have decent performance here. I don't think the DLC really does anything that's going to, like, really ramp up or hurt your performance, whatever the case would be. Talking about story a little bit, obviously we're not going into story specifics, but with following the footsteps of Miquella and interacting with all the NPCs, one of the things I found really nice about that was the story was detailed in a way where I think we almost had it just a little more upfront. And I guess the best way to describe this is, you know, lore has always been very obscure in Elden Ring and in the Souls game in general. I don't think that's a secret to anybody. But what's really nice here is because we are following the footsteps of Miquella and going along with all these NPCs who are also following them, we're frequently interacting with them. And as we complete their stories, we're getting more information that ties into the story of Miquella and his relationships with the other characters. And since the story is focused around Miquella, it definitely felt a lot more, I guess, consumable, because, you know, we have this central character that we're learning about and that we're getting lore about, and everyone is talking about him in particular. So there's not like tons of different story beats where you're getting lost and trying to piece together 8 different puzzles at the same time. Everything relates to Miquella in some capacity. And I think it definitely made the story of the DLC more digestible. There's still lots of things that I'm still curious about and things that are more obscure, but from an overarching perspective, I think it made it easier to consume as somebody that, you know, in true fashion typically just gets absolutely lost when it comes to From Software stories. I mean, it's just brawling out here in the world. But honestly, in final thoughts here, I mean, the best way to describe the DLC, it's like you had a summer fling, you know? It's like you met that person and y'all hit it off and you had fantastic chemistry and you were ready to spend the rest of your life with that person. But then the summer came to an end and you went separate ways, and that was that. But all of a sudden that person has come back into your life and you immediately hit it back off and everything's just going phenomenal. And that's what it feels like going into this DLC. It has the familiarity of Elden Ring, but at the same time, it's fresh, it's new, it just feels good. It feels right. And I'm just super excited for it. You know, I've already had a blast playing it. I'm already working through the walkthrough prep. And honestly, I think that any big concerns people would have had about the DLC, like the challenge is still there. The way the Skidoo Tree Blessings work, I think, was done absolutely wonderfully. It still has the, like, sense of mystery and exploration and finding hidden loot and all that stuff that you would expect from a FromSoft piece of content. And honestly, I think they just knocked it out of the park here. This is, if we, you know, when we're talking about Elden Ring from now on, if it's Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree together, I think together it puts them at probably the pinnacle of FromSoft's catalog. So either way, that is going to wrap things up for me. Obviously, I'll have the Let's Play and the walkthrough starting soon, along with a couple of starter guides. But yeah, I mean, y'all are in for an absolute delight. It's honestly just phenomenal.